So the next presentation is by Ms. Bruce, as outlined in CMD 18H 6.33. Ms. Bruce?
Thank you. My name is Dominique Bruce. I am indeed a teacher. For the record, I am here today to ask the Commission to revoke the license renewal of the old Pickering nuclear station, as it is undeniably an unreasonable safety risk for the people living in Pickering, Toronto, and the surrounding regions. I am a deeply concerned citizen of Toronto, a mother of 2 wonderful daughters, and an elementary school teacher of over 30 years. I live and teach within 28 kilometers of the old Pickering station. If we have learned anything from the nuclear accident at Fukushima 7 years ago, it is that nuclear power is clearly an unreasonable risk that could cause catastrophic damage to the people of the GTA, as well as poison the waters of the Great Lakes for the millions who depend on it daily. I believe this alone is sufficient reason to deny OPG's request to continue operating the Pickering nuclear station. Your Commission, OPG, and the province are responsible for the safety of everyone in the GTA in the event of a nuclear accident. We know without a doubt from the Fukushima accident that people at great distances may suffer or be deprived of their property in the event of an accident. Communities 50 kilometers from the Fukushima nuclear accident were evacuated. I live and teach less than 28 kilometers from Pickering and think that OPG and the province have been treating Pickering as only a risk to people next to the station. I think it should be treated by this Commission, OPG, and the province as a threat to all the GTA. Everyone who lives in the GTA should have information about how to prepare for a nuclear accident at Pickering. Yet there has been no information distributed. How would we all be evacuated? What is the plan? What should we do to keep our families safe, to keep our children safe, whether they're in school or a daycare or even in our homes? My family and my school have been provided no such information. The Pickering nuclear station operates in the middle of the GTA near millions of people. Toronto is known to have some of the worst traffic congestion in North America. In the event of an accident, I doubt that the province or OPG could reasonably implement emergency plans without people getting hurt. Here's an example. Recently, at the major intersections where I live at Victoria Park and Danforth Avenue, there is construction, and it usually takes about 20 minutes to get through that one light on a regular day to get to the 401. The other major routes near my area also have construction. Can you imagine what the roads would look like if, under construction, we had a nuclear accident? As a school teacher, I have seen the stress on parents and children when we have an early dismissal due to severe weather warnings. Parents are trying frantically to leave work from downtown to pick up their children at school before the storm arrives, yet they are stuck in traffic in the city center. Can you imagine what would happen in the case of a nuclear accident as parents try to reach their children at school? Families and schools are given guidelines on how to practice fire drills, whether at home or school. Where are the plans for us to practice and keep our children safe in the case of a nuclear accident? To my knowledge, schools in Toronto have been given no instructions about how to care for the children in the case of a nuclear accident. Schools near Pickering have potassium iodide pills, but my school does not. Toronto schools do not have KI pills stockpiled to administer it to our children, yet it may take their parents several hours to reach the school if the traffic is bad. Children are the most vulnerable to radiation, and the sooner they receive their pills, the better chance they have. Why have the province, OPG, and CNSC not met these most basic levels of citizen safety for a city the size of Toronto, when these same safety measures have been put in place around the Bruce nuclear station? Why have I not received an information pamphlet like this one from my friend in South Bruce that is sent out annually from Bruce Power? Pickering is closer to a large city than any other nuclear station in North America, and therefore it represents too great a safety risk. When it was built 45 years ago, the surrounding population was much lower. I seriously doubt that the CNSC and province would allow new reactors to be built so close to Toronto today. It's reasonable to say that we would not build reactors here, so it's time for us to shut Pickering down. I do not have confidence in the province to take these risks seriously. Instead of shutting Pickering down, they continue to encourage housing growth near Pickering, which just makes things worse in the event of an accident. I thus think it is up to the Commission to ensure our safety and not renew OPG's license. Though millions may be spent on upgrading the aging reactors, nothing will change the fact that Pickering is the oldest nuclear reactor, so close to a major city in North America. OPG is asking you to continue extending the station beyond its design life again and increase the risks further. In contrast, New York State is closing the Indian Point nuclear station because of the station's age and proximity to New York City. The risk of operating a nuclear station so close to New York is no longer reasonable. I think the same logic applies to Pickering. The people of Ontario do not use the majority of power generated from Pickering nuclear station. It's exported. No matter what you think of nuclear power, I think it's reasonable to say running Pickering to produce unneeded power is a totally unacceptable and unnecessary risk for the GTA. Our electricity bills are some of the highest rates in the country because of the costs of our aging nuclear reactors that are past their planned lifespan. Renewing the Pickering license will continue to cost Ontario's citizens exorbitant amounts of money for electricity while living with the threat of a nuclear accident for power we export at a loss. This makes no sense. It also represents unreasonable risk both financially and to the health of Ontario citizens. If, in the future, our provincial power needs should increase, we have a much cheaper and safer alternative source of hydropower available from Quebec. As things stand now, we don't need Pickering's power, therefore the license should not be renewed. I do not work at Pickering, but I can understand being worried about my job. This station must be shut down given its age. The workers at the Pickering nuclear station have the most experience working there, and they have families they need to support. If the CNSC did not renew the license, the money spent on nuclear energy could immediately be spent decommissioning the Pickering site using those same workers, rebuilding the Pickering waterfront after an environmental assessment, and finally invest in training the former employees for renewable energy jobs. In conclusion, based on the already overextended age of Pickering, its proximity to the large population in the GTA, its financial and safety burden to the citizens of Ontario, and the total lack of emergency preparations for our children and citizens in the GTA, I am asking the Commission to close Pickering for good and re-employ the workers in the immediate decommissioning of the station. If you make the decision to renew Pickering's license, I would like information for my family, my school, neighbors in the GTA on how to prepare for a nuclear accident. Thank you.
Thank you. Question?
Thank you for that. So I think many of your points we're going to hold to talk to the provincial OFMIM with respect to PNERP. And I don't know if you're able to come back to hear that conversation, but around your traffic congestion, emergency response plan, that sort of thing. But the question I would ask you is, what kind of communications would you like to get from OPG, and then I'm going to ask OPG about their communications plan and how far out in terms of concentric circles it goes.
Well, I think certainly something like this pamphlet that Bruce Nuclear sends out annually, because it talks about the types of things you would do in your household, even just basic things like turning off the air conditioners and things. People have no idea. And it also talks about how to administer the pills and so on. It's a regular reminder because people need that refresher. That's the same reason why we practice at least 6 times a year the fire drill with the children, those kinds of things. There would probably also need to be training for the teachers, for daycare workers, because when there's a storm warning, it takes parents a while. They're all trying to leave the downtown core at the same time, and as I think everyone in the room knows, that is not easy to do in rush hour.
Thank you. OPG?
Randy Lockwood for the record. I'm going to ask Scott Burns to speak to your question. But first, I just want to say something. I very much respect the intervener for coming here today. I read in the intervention she was both a mother and an elementary teacher, school teacher, that two positions I very much respect. So I don't want this to come across as we're the big giant corporation here with a very well refined team, which we are. We do listen to each and every person, and I would like that to be noted on the record that I very much appreciate this intervener coming forward.
Scott Burns for the record. So just to confirm, the question is just generally around communications?
Yeah,
or?
your communication plan. We'll hear from OFMEM tomorrow or the next day.
Okay. So, yeah, I can speak to OPG's communication plan, but I do need to state that it is done in partnership. It's actually written right into the emergency response plan. So yes, the other partners have an important voice in this conversation. And the Nuclear Emergency Management Coordinating Committee, which all of the other reactor facilities sit on, as do the province, has subcommittees that specifically deal with communication. The focus, which I believe is sort of the foundation, that the detailed planning zone is in line with industry standards. So the primary focus of the communication does go to the detailed planning zone, but there are efforts to extend beyond that. I know the region of Durham is going to be here, and they'll speak to that as well. So they're in terms of their communication, which we do together, we support, and financially we've invested millions of dollars in the last 5 years supporting our partners with these communications and being part of those communications. But they will speak to, they reach out beyond the 10-kilometer zone and out to the entire region of Durham. There seems to be a gap that we're hearing about in the City of Toronto beyond the 10K. Probably needs to be part of that further discussion, and the City of Toronto could speak to that. But what I will say is, as I mentioned earlier on this conversation, is there's a number of vehicles that OPG does use to reach our community. We have our Public Information Center, we have our community councils, we send out our newsletters, and we will continue to do that. We are very much interested in hearing about how we can improve reaching out to the community. I think what we're hearing is we may not be reaching everybody, and that is important, as Mr. Lockwood has stressed time and time again around our commitment to safety. We need to continue to invest in that and ensure that the community is receiving those messages. So as I also mentioned earlier, in an effort to understand how effective our communications are, we do polling, and I recognize there's, based on variables within polling, we'll hear about other results of polling and throughout the week. But we do that to try and get a sense of how effective our communication programs are. But we look at the strategy annually, and our emergency preparedness group works closely with our public affairs group and discuss the strategy, lessons learned from previous years, from polls, from all of these venues where our teams go out and talk to the community. We seize on those opportunities to inform next year's plan and the year after that. So as Mr. Lockwood stated earlier, we are committed to continuing our communications strategies to ensure that members of the public understand what to do in an emergency, which again is an unlikely event. We acknowledge that, but it is important that they have that understanding that we are reaching as many people in the community as we can.
So just to be clear, tomorrow, when the province is going to be here, I would be interested in the plan for the 10 kilometers, the 20 kilometers, and the 50 kilometers. I know that you are distributing within the 10. I remember you shared with us the pamphlet and all the stuff. I don't know what you do for the 20, and I don't know what you're doing for the 50. And together with the province, I want to understand what is a particular person within the 50, what kind of information they get, and what kind of a website that will deal, because everybody keeps talking that they cannot find the information. Please don't answer now, because I really think this should be delayed with the province here, because I understand it's a joint venture here. So the local municipalities, you and the province together should have some way to reach all those zones. And I'd like to understand the difference. So does anybody want to raise something else on this? No, this subject tomorrow. Any other subject that was raised? Go ahead.
Yes, I do have a question. This is for OPG and also for staff. Is it possible to shut down a nuclear power plant, skip the shutdown period and dismantle the reactor right away? Is it feasible? Is it safe? Is it possible? Is it pragmatic?
Robin Manley for the record. Just to make sure I understand your question, you're asking, is it feasible to shut down the reactor and immediately start to dismantle the actual reactor? Okay, so I will try and briefly summarize what would be involved in the process, and I'm looking for my team here to help me out if I get it a little bit wrong. So we have experience with shutting down a reactor safely, units 2 and 3, and then going through a process of safe stating those reactors, whereby what we do is we defuel the reactor, which means we use the fueling machines to remove all the irradiated fuel bundles from the channels. We put them in our irradiated fuel bays. That takes some number of, let's call it months, for lack of a more exact figure. Then you go through a process of removing all of the heavy water from the heat transport and moderator systems. And then what we did with those units is we went through a process of safe stating the systems. So certain electrical systems or other systems were taken out of service in a permanent way so that the reactors, those 2 reactors cannot be restarted. You have to maintain some other systems in service to sort of monitor the overall state. You can't turn off all the lights and all of everything, right? So you could do that, but you would have to go through that process for all of the units, right? You'd have to defuel them all. You'd have to take all the heavy water out of all of them, put them all in various kind of tanks. And then you would also have to begin the process of transferring the fuel from the irradiated fuel bays into dry storage containers. Because until the irradiated fuel bays have been completely emptied of fuel, because those irradiated fuel bays are in the plant, you could not actually dismantle everything until you'd finished that process, which would take, as has been mentioned earlier today, something on the order of 10 plus years to complete that before you could enter into a dismantling.
Randy Lockwood for the record. I would just like to add that to answer the Commissioner, we have considered, could we do this better if we went at it right after we shut down? And as Robin outlined, there's some practicalities here that we have to deal with the fuel, and that's a finite amount of time, approximately 10 years, that we just have to deal with. As well, we need to consider other aspects that with our current plan, based on our current understanding. And it will result in increased worker dose because we have not allowed the fields to decay. As well, that will also have impact on the public and the environment because, again, we start to dismantle this before we've allowed it to decay. As well as we've looked at, it will likely result in additional radioactive waste, which again has impact on the environment. So what we've concluded is the best thing to do based on our current understanding, and that's what our preliminary decommissioning plan says, is to defer. And I'll take you back then to what are we asking for? Commercial operations to 2024, a period to safely shut down and defuel the reactors, place them in safe storage, remove the heavy water, then a period of allowing the components to decay, plus letting the fuel, decay away in the fuel base, place them in safe storage, and then at that time, approximately at that time, the DGR becomes available to dispose the fuel waste and then move towards dismantle. Right? So you add all those things together, it also has a big impact on cost.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. Last word to you.
Thank you. And I feel that if the province OPG and CNSC are really being responsible for the health of the people of Ontario, both safety and financially, as we are not using this power but exporting it at a loss, considering our children beyond unreasonable risk, then the Pickering license cannot be renewed. Thank you.
Thank you.